Welcome to Testing in the Pub. Welcome to another Testing in the Pub session with me and Steve.
Hello.
Today we're going to be talking about schools of testing and the different schools of testing and how we feel about them.
Yeah, we are. I think there's quite a few splits within the testing community at the moment, and I think people are spending quite a bit of effort pointing fingers at each other. And for me, I don't think that's the most efficient way that we go forwards as a community, and it's not the most efficient way that we will be able to push our craft forwards.
There is a lot of bickering, isn't there? You do hear a lot of like catty comments getting thrown around. Everybody hates ISEB or ISTQB.
It depends how old you are, doesn't it? If you're, it's kind of quite interesting because I think you go to quite a lot of conferences or meetups or whatever, and recently where I've been to them, everyone at some point in some workshop or presentation or keynote or lean coffee event or whatever, someone has said, put your hands up if you're ISTQB or ISEB certified. And most of the room has put their hand up, but the kind of insinuation behind the person who asked the question is normally, oh yeah, you've got this, but it was probably a mistake, wasn't it? Or you were probably, oh you naive little tester back in 2003, you decided to do that when you knew no better. Whereas, well, maybe it is like that for some people. I don't know.
Well, I think in reality we've all got a lot to learn from each other, right? So I was at a conference a few weeks back now, and it very much felt like that. It felt like 2002, everyone was still doing waterfall.
Nice.
I know, it's like, what's this new thing, waterfall? And I'm like,
where's the test team? Oh yeah, we're in the basement, and where are the devs? Oh yeah, they're on floor 2.
There was a lot of emphasis around outsourcing as well, but I think that's just the nature of those businesses and those companies. So, but I got chatting to a few people there and shared my opinions, and they shared their opinions, and we kept it very friendly, and I took a lot from it. Like, one of the guys was from Sega, and he was saying that they still use waterfall with the nature of development.
Sega as in Sega.
Yeah. Brilliant. I just think Sonic.
Show my age there, don't I?
I think Sonic. But he got really angry because I was like, oh, Sega as in Sonic. And he was like, no, we don't just do Sonic. They're working on a really cool Alien computer game. Like, as in from the Alien.
Not Alien versus Sonic.
That would be awesome. Weird, but awesome. But anyway, so he was saying the nature of the work that they do, kind of, because it's video games and there's a lot of UAT phase at the end, then it made sense for them to use waterfall, and they tried agile and it didn't quite work, but it doesn't necessarily work for everyone, right? But yeah, it felt as if at the start of the conversation we were from two different schools of testing, and then after it was just kind of like, well, he was another tester, I was another tester. Well, we're both testers in the world, so let's share and collaborate and teach each other and learn from each other, you know. So it made sense, you know, from what you were saying.
It's contextual, and I don't mean contextual as in context driven. I mean contextual as in what you do appropriate to the context, providing you're picking the best method doing something that's most appropriate to the context in which you're in. Then does it really matter whether it's X or Y or Z or?
Yeah.
I don't think it does.
Yeah. Maybe in some cases it might, but I think people get caught up in it too much, don't they?
They do.
Jump in the bandwagon.
They do.
Especially with for example, the context-driven school of testing, where it's like you've got powerful people constantly saying it's my way, you're wrong. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah,
I must admit, I kind of get caught up in that because what they say makes sense, you know. But at the same time, then I get involved in the agile testing sort of school, and what they were saying made sense as well. You know.
What would you say are the differences if we're going to kind of categorize schools of testing? So maybe let's say we categorize like the certification heavy schools of testing, and then let's say we think about context-driven school of testing and the agile school of testing. Particularly, I can kind of see the differences between the certification-heavy schools and the context-driven.
Yeah.
What's the difference between context-driven and agile testing, in your opinion?
Initially, I wouldn't have seen any difference, but now, having been aware of them both, I think the context-driven skill testing, it's essentially you have to take your situations and your perspectives into account, right? And
Yep.
agile school is more focused on working in, the agile methodology for your company. So it focuses more on how to test in this agile environment, whereas the context skill testing doesn't. But they're still saying the same similar sort of stuff, and it's the same people that kind of go to both as well, you know. But it still feels very standoffish, particularly from the context-driven skill testing, you know. So, but they are kind of teaching the same things. One's just more focused on agile, the other one's more focused on, I want to say psychology.
Well, it's kind of testing as social sciences.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that's, for me, I don't think that categorises context-driven testing. That's just an element of, well, I've had my eyes kind of open to testing as social sciences by testers who class themselves as context-driven.
Right.
I don't know whether that means that is necessarily a part of context-driven testing. It just means that's an area those people view as important and also fun and also interesting. In that sense, I completely agree with them.
I would say that I see that as important, and I see the other stuff as important, and I see the benefits, but I wouldn't class myself as being in one school over the other.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? And yeah, you kind of mentioned the kind of the finger pointing, especially. I mean, what I really don't like hearing is the term factory testers or factory school testers. I don't know whether you've heard that, but it's incredibly derogatory. It's an incredibly derogatory term, and it almost makes, well, people can change, I think, and I think you've always got to go through life thinking that people want the best for themselves and people can change, and therefore trying to put that sort of label on people who maybe just at the moment don't know any better, don't know that there is another way of doing things that could be better and could, in their particular context. It's somewhat unfair.
Put it this way back when I first started as a tester, well, I started in a company that had a test team that was very much waterfall because of the nature of the products. It was printers, and they put us on ISEB. It was called ISEB at the time, and at the time I didn't know about anything about testing really. I had learned from the guys that I worked with, and I learned a lot from going on the ISEB course and from the course instructor as well. And the exam, granted, is multiple choice. It could be run a bit better, let's be honest.
Yeah. Some of the syllabus is
and
somewhat out of date, let's be honest.
Some of the questions that were on the exam didn't really relate to what we had learned, and some of them were blatantly obvious that my granny could answer them. Do you know what I mean? So
that would be an interesting test, wouldn't it? Yeah. How many members of my family can I get ISEB or ISTQB Foundation certified?
So yeah, the exam I think is what people really get annoyed at. It should be done. The exam feels as if it's a money thing, but what they actually teach is it can add value. I'm not saying it will add value to everyone, but certainly for me, in that situation that I was in when I was a junior, I did learn from it. And then when I moved down to London, the company that I worked for when I moved down, they put me in the second part. So I'm actually at the second part of ISEB, and that's something that, I mean, right now, with the different schools, people say that, and they probably cringe while they say it, like I've just cringed there.
Yeah, there was a fair amount of cringing going there. One day we should do these with a webcam running, like they always do on like Radio 1 and stuff like that. You would have seen a cringe there if we'd had a webcam running.
Yeah. So I got the second part, but the second part, because I was more aware of the other schools, I was challenging it a bit more, and I think the instructor liked that, to be honest. He liked to be challenged with it, and he came back with some good responses as well. And I must say that a lot of the exam was repeated from the first exam as well. So again, the exam was worthless, really, in my opinion. But I think the term factory school testing comes into play because it seems to be that this process of going and sitting an exam and then everybody thinking, oh, I can do testing and this is the only way. It's not necessarily the fault of ISTQB, although they run the exam. I think it's the mindsets of maybe the people that get the exam, because you see in a lot of other up and coming countries with software testing, they think that get the exam and then that's me got my career set for life, right?
But I think that's almost I think a little bit by design, because the reason, or one of the reasons why the certification boards are able to essentially make money out of this is because they market by fear. So they market essentially by, if you don't have this certification, then how are you going to get your next job? This is needed. Or they market at organisations with, what do you mean you're going to offer a testing service and your testers aren't certified? No client's ever going to take you seriously. And that's the real problem I have with certification and ISTQB and others, is that that's not the only way, in exactly the same way as the context-driven school of testing or the agile school of testing. It's not the only way of doing things, but if you market yourself as the only way and you market by fear as well, then you are just doing it for the money.
Well, are you going to hire a developer that hasn't got his qualifications in development course that he's been on?
Yeah, well, it depends what for, but a lot of, increasingly, companies don't look at that. They look at what you've got on GitHub. They look for evidence, they look for examples. It's essentially the equivalent of portfolios for designers.
I think you're onto something, Steve. How can testers have a portfolio?
It's a fair point, actually.
That's what's needed. None of the qualifications are, because I completely agree that qualifications are, I disagree with the ISEB exam. Some of it was complete guff, right? But with HR, for example, in most companies, they'll be like, okay, how can I distinguish a good tester from a bad tester?
Well, maybe it comes back down to, as it often does, with how you spend your time. And I mean, not all developers are going to have side projects or whatever sitting on GitHub in exactly the same, for various reasons, in exactly the same way as a lot of testers are not directly interacting regularly with the testing community, and therefore, because you could get a portfolio of work essentially from interactions with the test community, speaking at meetups, blogging, all that visibility. There are very good reasons why some people don't do that. There's some very bad reasons, but people have lives and people have priorities. Not everyone learns and interacts in the same way.
Oh yeah, that's very true. I do like that idea of having some sort of portfolio, but I don't know how feasible it is.
Let's get some ideas. Anyone listen to this? If you've got any ideas how you can put together a test portfolio, get in touch.
So, what about conferences? There seems to be, at different conferences, the divides continue. There's context-driven conferences, there's agile testing conferences, there's I want to say old school, I feel bad, but there's sort of like ISTQB focused conferences. Do you think there should be something that's more mixed?
I think we can make them mixed. I don't think. I've never noticed. I've spoken at a variety of different conferences, and I've never deliberately picked a conference based upon its kind of perceived reputation, which school it fits into. Now, I mean, I wouldn't put myself in any particular school of testing. I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm contextual in that sense. I'll take what I think feels best for me, and I'll learn from everybody. I'll talk at any conference where I feel I've got something useful to say. So in that sense, you kind of think, well, do we need a conference that brings everything together, or do we just need a variety of people interacting in these conferences in the way that feels right to them?
But that's still an element of mixing, right? Because, for example, if you go and speak at a conference that's predominantly, I say, ISTQB focused, and the majority of the talks are going to be about, I don't know, how Waitrose still use waterfall and outsource.
They may be now, but they don't have to be like that. And I think that's kind of unless the conference organisers are trying to deliberately put together an agenda, a program which is deliberately has kind of a deliberate rhetoric. If they're not trying to do that, and certainly from the conferences I've seen, there's a wide variety. I mean, something like Eurostar, as an example, has a wide variety of different talks from different people, and I think a lot of the
that's good.
a lot of the other
pick that up,
yeah.
But if you look at, I don't know, that conference that I went to a few weeks ago, where it was predominantly waterfall, and I think there was only 2 talks out of a 2-day conference that were about agile. One was about agile, and one was about continuous delivery.
Yeah.
And then everybody was kind of like, "Oh, what's this?" Do you know what I mean?
But they may have saved
scared of it. But if the conference organisers, well, like you said, Eurostar are kind of doing it, but if more people did it, if all the conferences started to do it and mix it a little bit, then we would learn a lot about what each of the different schools can bring.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's up to the people who speak. I don't think maybe I'm slightly naive, but I've not seen a deliberate attempt at any conference to exclude everything other than a single school of testing. In that sense, there's always, yes, some are more biased towards one than the other, but there always seems to be room for different perspectives, and I think it's up to people to go to the conferences, maybe speak at the conferences where they maybe a little bit scared about getting shot down because the viewpoint they're putting forward does not match up with their perception of the school of testing that conference is aligned to.
Yeah.
Because there'll be people in the audience who are not aligned to any particular school of testing. And
yeah, of course.
And you don't change mindset overnight. You change it slowly but surely, almost one person at a time.
Yeah, but the conferences kind of do still have, I feel that they do still have that focus, whether they intend to or not, on a particular skill, because you look at agile testing days focused on the agile testing community.
Yeah.
Test bash focused on context-driven community,
But it kind of was this year. I'm not sure whether. I'd argue it possibly wasn't so much the year before. Whether that was deliberate, I don't know. What can one do to try and bring these kind of schools of testing together? Because I think the key thing here is, there's still far too much dev versus test arguing. As methodologies bring teams together in a cross-functional way, and as there is much more focus put on the quality of the deliverable and quality as a team activity, I think those walls start to get broken down, which I think is very, very good. What we don't need, though, as those walls start to get broken down, is more and more walls springing up within testing, because I don't think that's going to help us at all. So what can be done to bring schools of testing together?
That's a very good question. I've got no idea. Apart from the conferences and meetups and things like that, being more mixed, but I don't know how you could cause that to happen. What else can be done?
Is it, well, I guess, is it a matter of focusing on what can be done, or focusing first on not pushing things any further apart?
True.
That's kind of my bigger concern, is we seem to be heading further apart at the moment rather than closer together.
Maybe we're looking at this wrong. Why does it matter? Why does it matter that there's so many different schools that are bickering? Does it matter?
I think a community is stronger with a consistent voice.
But multiple communities is better than one big community, right?
Is it?
Well, if we had one big community that just agreed, then...
It's about constructive challenge, isn't it? And I think a lot of what we see at the moment, the kind of virtual and actual slanging matches between schools of testing, they're not constructive.
Yeah. So
challenge.
maybe the deep-rooted issue here is communication and
Potentially it is.
open-mindedness. So
Yeah,
maybe it's more.
I think that's it.
You granted, I won't agree with everything that you say, but
Do you?
we will have a report and open-mindedness and communication that will allow us to at least talk about it sensibly and not get our backs up about it all. Whereas the schools of testing seem to be at the point where their backs are up straight away. So even if someone tries to offer a hand in trying to talk about something that they believe might be wrong, but then that other person's back's up straight away, so they're just going to reject it straight away.
Yeah, where's the olive branch?
Yeah.
Essentially. Well, that's a fair point, maybe. I mean, maybe, as you say, it comes down to open-mindedness. It comes down to influence, but positive influence.
Yeah.
Or even actually identifying the need to influence rather than the need to just dictate.
I mean, I'm trying to think, even within the context-driven school of testing, it seems as if there's been a split between the RST side and the VBST side. Is there a split?
Yeah, maybe
there?
potentially a little bit. I don't know. I mean,
Or is it just two guys arguing?
Yeah, there's a bit of that too. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you went and asked testers who would class themselves as purely as context driven, then you'll find a lot of people, a lot of very clever, very sensible people who have done RST and have done BBST or BBST Foundation or whatever. So I think that's maybe more of a kind of, it's more of a headline thing rather than in reality. I think there's a lot of there's a lot of sensible people ultimately who are just doing what's right and doing what teaches them how to be the best testers they can be, and also without needing that kind of tick in the box of, yes, I am certified, I can put this icon on my CV. I hate that. If I get CVs that have got the ISTQB icon on the top of them, it's just your ability to cut and paste, or in fact your ability to breach the copyright or the trademark of the ISTQB and copy and paste using the internet. That doesn't tell me you're a good tester. That tells me you value an icon more than you potentially value your experience. Handy hint there if you ever submit a CV.
Do you have it on your CV?
Do I have the ISTQB icon on my CV?
Maybe not the icon,
no, I
but
do not.
maybe just some sort of, maybe even just a sentence saying it. Do you have a sentence?
I've got ISO practitioner back Daniel, when it was difficult to get, when you had a 3-hour written exam. This was back in 2003. I think, to be honest, my experience kind of mirrors yours a little bit, in the sense of at that point it was the thing to do. It was, elements of it were useful. There was an exam at the end of it, and frankly, if you've done the course, you may as well do the exam.
Yep.
Unfortunately, those courses are very much like kind of you know when you learn to drive, and you don't learn to drive when you're learning to drive. You learn to pass a driving test.
Yeah.
And so everything you do is entirely built around the fact that in the driving test, the examiner may ask you to do X, Y, or Z. Therefore, let's go and learn X, Y, or Z. And I7 and ISTQB are very much about, we need to teach you to pass the exam. Oh, and by the way, you might pick up some useful information along the way.
Yeah. I felt that because it was crammed into 3 days as well, it was kind of like, oh, we'll skip over this section because that's less important in the exam that you're going to get.
Yeah.
Let's go to this next section. You know what I mean? But whereas, although I've been on the RST course as well, for a change back, and although he was doing a lot of skipping of parts, it felt more focused on the important parts that he was talking about. You know what I mean? Rather than having an exam at the end of it, just focusing on what's in the exam. You know?
It's ultimately about coming out of that at the beginning of a journey to being a better tester, not coming out of that with certification. I haven't actually answered your question, I realise. I have to answer it, or someone will pick up on it. Have I got ISEB on? Yeah, it currently is in the list of courses at the back of my CV.
Mine is in very small text in the bottom of mine. So.
I mean, I think actually kind of just picking up on that as well. There's this kind of selling the need for certification by fear. Unfortunately, particularly still with recruitment agents at the moment. There's still a perception by those who don't really understand testing in much detail that you need to have ISEB or you're nobody, and it's almost just like a tick in the box exercise.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. It's like HR people use it as a filter.
Yeah,
They use it as a filter incorrectly.
It's sad.
And they just filter out people that don't have the certifications. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, if someone put ISEB on their CV, got through that filter, and then you were interviewing them and you found out that they didn't actually have ISEB, but they explained that they put it on the CV to get through the HR filter, would you be upset at that?
If they could demonstrate they were a good tester, probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, as I kind of said before, I don't like getting CVs that have got like ISEB or ISTQB icons on them right at the top or anything like that.
Icons are bad, people. Icons are bad.
That's kind of a bit rubbish. But the best sort of discussions I've had in interviews with people, because I'll always pick up on, like, if someone's got ISTQB and just make a little kind of question about it. The best ones are where you can get into a detailed discussion, a little bit like the discussion we're having with someone who can explain why they did it. They can explain whether they got some positives from it and what they were, and they can also understand that it's not the be all and end all. And so that's not the school they're in exactly the same way as maybe they're not in any of the other schools. They're somewhere in the middle, learning and taking the best bits from everybody, in order to make them as good at their job and as good at their craft as they can be.
Yeah.
Those are the sort of people you want, the sort of people who can articulate why they've done something, and can also very succinctly articulate what they didn't get out of it and what they don't agree with, rather than just trying to kind of play safe.
In other words, really good communication skills. Communication is key, isn't it?
It's communication, but it's not just communication. It's an understanding that no one person in this world is right. Some people, everybody has opinions, and everybody should have strength in their ability ultimately to decide what they think's right and what bits and pieces they're going to believe from different people.
That's interesting, because as a tester we're always told to challenge everything, right? So we challenge everything, but at the same time we're told there's no right way, but because of that word challenge, it feels as if difficulties involved. Do you know what I mean? We're trying to be difficult and challenging everything, but it's not actually about that. It's about, yes, challenge everything and understand that no one's right, but do it in a nice way.
Challenge positively, and I think that's the key thing. Challenge positively as a tester, but also what we're beginning to see with the kind of bringing it back to the schools of testing is it's negative challenge at the moment between some people within the industry. If it was positive challenge, and if you've got an opinion, ultimately you should be confident and articulate enough to stand up and defend that opinion. Otherwise, how serious are you about that opinion? Rather than anyone can sling mud at somebody else. That's easy. I mean, I guess to kind of wrap things up, there's a lot of different schools of testing at the moment, and from my perspective, we're maybe not going at this in the most positive way. Instead of thinking about influencing and thinking about the bigger picture, I think there's a little bit too much pointing at some of the people in the other camp and thinking that one is better than them, which I don't think ultimately for us as a whole is the most positive way of going forward. Now, it's very simple to say that. It's in practice a lot more difficult to do anything about it, but it's very much about what everybody can do, little things every day to think about why do you do what you do and how do you learn. Where do you learn from? What have you learned that's important? What maybe isn't? Take stuff from every different school and combine it together for you. It's essentially it's always almost going to be like your own personal school, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's what it is. Skills of testing, the clues in the name. Skill, you do at school, you learn. So, so they're all, you can learn from them all. That's what I think. Learn from them all. Take the bits that you agree and you can use and are helpful to you, and then leave the rest that's not useful or you disagree with, or
Yeah.
find out why it's not valid. Talk about why it's not valid for your situation and perspective, and then praise the stuff that's good.
Yeah.
As well. So.
And where somebody is doing something which you feel is fundamentally flawed, then call them out in a positive way. If you're not doing it in a positive way, then it's not effective. It's not useful, and all it does is foster the split in the communities again, and gets us back to kind of where we're in danger of going.
Yeah.
It pushes us all further apart.
So let us know how you listeners feel in the comments. Get involved in discussion. Are we talking sense, or are we just completely on the wrong path? Do you think that there should be more of a mixed sort of atmosphere, environment, or do you think that we should keep it separate?
Yeah.
And why?
Yeah. In the comments or at Testing in the Pub on Twitter. Let's get some positive discussion going.